Hello learners, I am Dr. Arun Kumar, faculty member, School of Management, Sastra University. In this session, we are going to discuss about ethics in business research. Before we start the session, let's look into the learning objective of this session. What issues are covered in research ethics that we will be discussing by taking some of the examples, and also the goal of no harm for all research activities and what constitute no harm for all participants, researcher and research sponsor. Those areas we will be discussing under the context called research ethics. So before we move on before we discuss on the ethical issues, when you talk about ethics in business research, it is nothing but the code of conduct, or we can talk about expected societal norms of behavior while conducting research. When a researcher is supposed to conduct a research, there are certain code of conduct as a researcher has to follow. It is mandatory practice. And also certain behavior from the researcher side is expected and it becomes the societal norm. So ethical conduct applies to the organization as well, and also the sponsors who sponsors the research, and also it is applicable to the researcher who undertake the research, and also it is also applicable to the respondents who provide information to the researcher. Am I right? I mean, the respondent who provide data to the researcher. Okay. So the observance of the ethics begins with the person who is instituting the research, who should do so in good faith always, and also he should pay attention to what the results indicate, and also surrendering all his ego while doing the research and pursue organizational matters, rather than he should not give importance to his self-interest. And also when you talk about ethical conduct, should also be reflected in the behavior of the researcher who conduct the investigation during the research process, the participants who provide the data, and the data has to be kept confidential, and also the analyst who provide the results, and the entire research team that presents the interpretation of the results, and suggest alternative solutions. So in all these aspects, ethical code of conduct has to be maintained. So when I talk about ethics and business research, ethical behavior, actually pervades each step of the research process. If you look at this, you can see this research process. To start with clarifying, you need to, as a researcher, ethical issues has to be addressed in all the stages of the research process. For example, when as a researcher, when they are trying to clarify the research questions, they're supposed to discover the management dilemma, because during the in the process of exploratory research, he has to very clearly define the management questions, and also while defining the research question, he has to refine the research question, and make sure he will not disclose the confidential information to any other parties involved, because of the reasons that because sponsors who sponsors the research they have go for an agreement whereby the sponsors have requested the researcher not to disclose the information to anybody. And also in the process of the preparation of the research proposal, sponsors, we need to provide the sponsors the right to quality research, There should not be any kind of malpractices in the research. And also, when you talk about the sponsor's right of purpose non-disclosure, as a researcher, you have to abide by their expectations of the sponsor. And also, researchers' right to absence of sponsors cohesion. Sometimes it is required. And the researchers' right to absence of sponsors deception. In that context, you need to abide by the requirement of the sponsors. Sometimes what happen in the strategy also, in terms of data collection design and in terms of sampling design, in case of instrument development, whereby in each stage of the research process, ethics has to be maintained because of the fact that participants' deception, in the sense that you cannot, reveal any kind of information to other, party who is not, whom as a researcher we are not supposed to disclose those kind of informations. And also in terms of data collection and preparation also, you have to maintain confidentiality. And of course, at the stage of data analysis and interpretation, you need to maintain confidentiality in terms of research reporting and until the management make management decisions. So research is accountable for maintaining all these sorts of, I have mentioned here what they're supposed to do here on this context. And when you talk about the ethical behavior of the researcher, and also the respondents have to be treated uh, uh, very ethically, and also sometimes confidential information has to be safeguarded by all the business researcher as part of business ethics. And there are business journals such as the Journal of Business Ethics and the Business Ethics Quarterly. I think all the researcher has to devote some time to go through those inputs on business ethics while doing research. And also there is a stringent guidelines given by the American Psychological Association as established stringent guidelines for conducting research, and all the researcher has to follow those norms given in their guidelines. So that as a researcher, you can conduct the research in a very ethical manner, and all the interest of all concerned, I mean, all stakeholders can be safeguarded. Okay. So moving further, you know, when you talk about the ethical treatment of participation, isn't it? So when the participants, I mean the respondent who participate in your research, you need to, as a researcher, you need to explain the problem area. The research objective has to be clearly explained to the participant. The intention of the research has to be explained to the participant, so that in fact they also will understand the significance of your research. At the same time, the participants will also reveal genuine and honest information as a respondent, like that. And also you need to explain how this research is going to benefit the stakeholders. All that has to be revealed to the participants. And the next aspect we need to deal with is that explain participant right and protection. So what this research is constitute, what kind of rights and protection has to be protected from both mutually, from both sides, as an interviewer as well as the participants who are participating in the research process. And next one is, when you take information about the participants, obtain the informed consent from the participants, so that what happen, the participant can wholeheartedly reveal certain kind of sensitive informations or confidential information, since you have promised them that the information will be protected very confidentially. Next one is the components of informed consent in business ethics. That is, first thing is like, you need to identify a researcher who possesses the necessary quality to be a research person. And also you describe the topic in detail. I mean, describe the survey topic, what is the purpose of the topic, all that to the participant, and also describe the target sample. That is very, very important, whom you are going to make a survey and get the data, and also identify sponsor, isn't it? And what is that? What is the research agency? Is it the ICCR or Impress, like that? You need to make sure you need to identify the sponsor and what is the purpose of the sponsor. All that has to be clearly explained to the participants. And also you're supposed to describe the purpose of the research, and make sure you promise anonymity and confidentiality to the participants, so that they provide answers to you in good faith, and also they provide you information with the right time commitment and all that. And also make sure that the participation is voluntary, it is not forceful, and with the willingness from the participants, they have to provide information to you. At the same time, state item non-response is acceptable, and if any items, if they feel like they don't want to disclose information on certain item of your instrument, and allow them not to. It is at their discretion whether to answer it or not. And also, anything pertaining to research, ask for permission, so that the ethics of the research will be well maintained. Okay. Next one is, let's talk about the characteristics of informed consent. And there are, few characteristics. One is the, competence of the researcher and the participants. And also, when you talk about the next aspect is, the participant should be voluntary in nature to provide information to you. At the same time, they should be informed properly about the intention and aim of the research, and what are the benefits they are going to avail through the research. All that has to be disclosed to the participants. At the same time, the participants as well, the researcher, should have the necessary knowledge to participate in the research process as the requirement of the research topic. So many institutions require that all research, whether funded or unfunded by the government, by reviewed by local and state government agency, first is the guarantee of obtaining complete informed consent from the participants is a mandatory process. The second is the risk assessment and benefit analysis review has to be well educated to the participants who are participating in the research process. And also, when you talk about the complete informed consent, has four characteristics, and these are named, I think I have given in the slide. The participant must be, as I said, they should be competent to give the consent, and next one, the participant should be, the consent must be voluntary and free from coercion. At the same time, when you talk about informed, the next element is called informed. That is, participant must be adequately informed to make a decision. And the last one is the knowledge perspective. As I was explaining you, participants should know the possible risk or outcomes associated with the research process. And moving further, the ethical responsibilities. When you talk about the ethical responsibility, whenever you do research, which is more towards collecting data about the children's, and especially when you do research, certain information There are certain moral values has to be maintained with the respondent. If suppose the respondent is a children, so a special guidelines apply to children, and informed consent means I think when the children are participating, you have to get the approval from the respective children's parent. So that is very, very important, and you should not just like that meet the children and get their opinion. So you need to, before that, you need to get the permission of their respective parents. So next one is the we talk about deception. So in that, disguising non-research activities and camouflaging true research objective. It means that you always should not, cheat the participants. In any means, I mean to say here, that is, you have to clearly explain the purpose of the research, and at any cost, you should not, hide the intention of the research and the benefits of the research and the purpose of the research in any means. That's about the deception while doing the research. And also the most important component of research is that debriefing, and explain any deception, describe purpose, share the results, provide follow-up. So in situations where participants are intentionally or accidentally deceived, they should be debriefed once the research is complete. So that's the context here. Explain any deception and describe purpose. For example, debriefing describes the goals of the research as well as the truth and reasons for any deceptions. And next one is the share the results. It means that the results are shared after the study is complete. And the last one is provide follow-up. It means that participants who require any medical or psychological follow-up attention will receive it during the debriefing process. So that's where we discussed about the element called debriefed. And next one is, let's move further. Let's talk about the participants' confidentiality. So what is this participants' confidentiality? All individuals have the right to privacy, and researchers must respect that right, isn't it? Once a guarantee of confidentiality is given to the participants who participate in the research, and as a researcher, you have to make sure that their interest and confidentiality is protected, since you are given, um, so the next aspect here is we talk about, uh, that is, researchers protect participants' confidentiality in several ways. That it means that how researchers protect participants' confidentiality. By obtaining signed non-disclosure document, only researcher who have signed non-disclosure forms should be allowed to access to the data. And also we can do that by restricting access to participants' identification. And also we can do that by revealing participants' information only with written consent. Okay. And restricting access to data instruments where the participants is identified is possible here. And non-disclosure of data subsets, that is also there. And also the above methods, whatever we followed here, will really minimize the chance for a participants to identified and matched with his or her responses. Links between data and identifying information must be minimized. Interview response sheets should be inaccessible to everyone except the editors and the data entry personnel. And next one is data collection instrument may be destroyed once data are in a data file for very for very confidential purpose. It has to be done. And also for very small groups, data should not be made available if it would be easy to pinpoint a person in that group. So these are the things, as a researcher, we need to do that in order to maintain the ethical practice. That's what gets given here. To recap: obtain signed non-disclosure, restrict access to ID, and reveal only with written consent, and non-disclosure of data subsets, and minimize instruments requiring ID. And the next aspect is the right of privacy. So right to refuse prior permissions to interview has to be taken care from the participants. And also, please don't waste the participants' time. I mean, limit the time required, to the survey process. And when you talk about uh, the U.S. Safe Harbor Agreement, it has been given in that country. But the point here is, whenever you do research, give notice. Like, companies must notify consumers and participants about what information is being collected, how that information will be used, who that information will be shared with, and how individuals can contact the organization with inquiries or complaints. And next one is, let's talk about the choice. Consumers and participants must be provided with an opt-out mechanism for any secondary uses of data and for disclosure to third parties. For sensitive information, especially, participants must opt in before providing data that will be shared to the participants. And also, when you talk about access, individuals, I mean the participant, must have access to personal information that the organization holds and be able to correct, amend, and delete information where it is inaccurate, except where this burden or expense of providing access would be disproportionate to the risk to the individual privacy. And also, in case of security, organization must take responsible precautionary measures to protect personal information from the loss and misuse or unauthorized access, disclosure, alteration, and distractions of data. So the security should be given due care. And onward transfer, when you talk about onward transfer, companies disclosing personal data to a third party must adhere to the notice and charge. That's very, very important. And the principle, a third party must subscribe to the safe principles given by the research authorities. And when you talk about the data integrity, see, the reasonable steps must be taken to ensure that data collected are reliable, accurate, complete, and current. And there should not be any kind of malpractices, since if you do manipulation of data, then what happens? The results also get manipulated after analysis. So, looking at the enforcement, company must ensure that there are readily available and affordable independent mechanisms to investigate consumer complaints during the process of research. So this is very, very required process, because many companies are coming forward to do research. In that, they have to abide by all these guidelines and protect the interest of the participants who are participating in the research process. And moving further, we talk about confidentiality has to be maintained. In terms of sponsor, we should, if the sponsor requests the researcher not to disclose who is the sponsor of the research, in that context, you should not disclose who is the sponsor for the research. And also, you should also, if there is a purpose of non-disclosure, that has to be maintained. And whatever the findings you find out from the research, has to be kept confidential, and you should not disclose to any parties who is requesting for this information. So what to do if coerced? So if that being the case, you try to educate on purpose, and also you emphasize a fact finding role, and also and explain the problems involved if it is coerced, and also terminate a relationship if that being the case. Clear? Next one, in terms of ethical behavior, what can the researcher do to remain ethical? There are four suggestions provided in this slide. The researcher can attempt to do that. Okay. I was explaining what to do if coerced. It means that occasionally researcher may be asked by sponsors to participate in unethical behavior. In that context, as a researcher, what can the researcher do to remain ethical? And there are four suggestions provided in this slide. The researcher can attempt to educate the sponsor to the purpose of the research, why he has been involved in this research, and also explain the researcher's role as a fact finder, and also explain how distorting the truth, and also if you look at that, explain the researcher's role as a fact finder, and also explain how distorting the truth or you know breaking the faith will lead to future problems as a researcher may encounter in future. And if others fail, the sponsors not agree to that, then as a researcher, it's better to terminate the relationship with the sponsor. So we talk about the effective codes of ethics. So when you talk about the effective codes of ethics, so when we discuss about effective codes of ethics, there are few components here. One is regulate. Next one is regulate and protect and specify behavior and enforceable. So what it actually means, many organizations have code of ethics. A code of ethics is an organization codified set of norms or standards of behavior that basically guide moral choice about the research behavior. So effective codes are those that are regulative, and it will protect the public interest and the interest of the profession served by the code, and also it is very much behavior specific, and is of course it is enforceable. Okay, so these things has to be followed by the researcher as well as the organization who are involved in the research process. So before we wind up, I think I have covered the aspects of ethics involved in business research, and the key terms are code of ethics, confidentiality, debriefing, deception ethics, informed consent, non-disclosure, finding purpose and sponsor, right to privacy, right to quality, right to safety. Okay. So before we wind up, the most important aspects in academic research is called plagiarism. Do you understand this? There are a lot of software we have called Turnitin, which any lines when you cut and paste in your research work, it is considered to be plagiarism. If any lines which is more than 2 lines, if it is being presented in quoted form, then if there is a proper citation as per APA format, then it's okay. If it is not cited, and you are not, if you are cutting and pasting of other work without acknowledging, and you supposed to synthesis their stuff, and you have to put it in your research, and at the same time when you take the inference from others research work, you need to do referencing. I mean, cite, it has to be properly cited as per the APA format. If otherwise, it is not at all an ethical practice. As being the management students, you're supposed to keep in mind. So plagiarism is one of the major factor in the present scenario. People give more importance to the area of plagiarism in ethical practice. Hope you guys all understood the concept of business ethics, especially with reference to business research. Hope you all enjoyed the session. Thank you.